The rain hammered the roof of the old brick building like accusations no one dared voice, and in that storm-swept conference room on the third floor, Eloan Hargrove's voice sliced through the downpour sharper than any thunder. "Lucia, if you think half-hearted research like this will ever pierce the armor of a jury in Monroe County, you're dreaming in the wrong zip code." Her words hung there, cold and unyielding, as the rest of the team shifted in their seats, eyes darting to the polished mahogany table like it held some escape. Lucia felt the heat rise in her chest, not from shame but from the familiar sting of being singled out, the way Eloan's gaze always seemed to pin her like a specimen under glass, dissected, dismissed, utterly unseen. Monroe, Louisiana, sprawled out beyond those fogged windows like a half-forgotten memory. Antebellum mansions rotting at the edges along the Washita River, shotgun shacks huddled in the shadows of cypress trees, and a main street where debutantes in sundresses still pretended the world hadn't cracked open decades ago. It was a town built on layers of silt and secrets, where the humid air carried whispers of old money and older sins, and where Lucia Reyes had landed 5 years ago, fresh out of Tulane with a law degree that felt more like a ticket out than a key in. She'd taken the junior associate gig at Hargrove and Associates not for the prestige, though the firm had its share, defending the landed gentry against slip-and-fall suits from the mill workers, but because it was steady, and steady meant survival in a place that chewed up dreams like cane stalks in a grinder. Eloan Hargrove was the firm's North Star, a woman in her mid-40s whose reputation preceded her like the scent of magnolias after a flood. Intoxicating, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. Born and bred in Monroe's gilded underbelly, she'd clawed her way to partner by 35. Her cases a string of victories that kept the firm's name etched in brass above the door. To the outside world, she was the epitome of Southern grace. Tailored linen suits, a smile that could disarm a deposition, and a marriage to Dr. Harlan Beaumont that the society pages fawned over like it was the second coming of Scarlet and Rhett. But to Lucia, Eloan was a cipher. A storm cloud in pearls who doled out praise like rare coins and criticism like Confederate lead. Every memo Lucia drafted came back bleeding red ink. Every courtroom strategy she proposed met with that arched brow and a curt "try again." It wasn't just professional. It felt personal, like Eloan had peered into Lucia's soul and found it wanting. Lucia had grown up in the barrios of Houston, daughter of a seamstress and a truck driver who crossed the border twice before she was born, their hands callous from stitching hems and gripping steering wheels through endless nights. Faith was the spine of their home. Rosaries clicked like metronomes during dinner prayers, and Sundays meant Mass at Our Lady of Guadalupe, where the priest's sermons on sin wrapped around Lucia like kudzu. She'd known she was different by 14, when the girls in youth group started giggling over boys and Lucia's pulse quickened instead at the curve of Sister Maria's neck as she bent to light candles. It wasn't a choice, it was a quiet revelation, buried under layers of guilt, and the fear of shattering the fragile peace her parents had built. College had been her exhale. New Orleans a riot of jazz and anonymity where she could kiss a girl named Tessa under the balcony lights without the world tilting off its axis. But Monroe? It was a step backward, a town where family values meant picket fences and prying eyes, and where Lucia kept her weekends to dive bars on the outskirts, nursing beers with the other transplants who whispered about leaving someday. That afternoon in the conference room, as the team filed out into the gray drizzle, Lucia lingered, stacking files with deliberate slowness. The air smelled of stale coffee and wet earth seeping through the cracks. Eloan hadn't moved, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the edge of her leather folio, silver rings catching the last light from the storm-lashed sky. "Something on your mind, Ms. Reyes?" Her tone was silk over steel, the kind that invited confession and punished it in equal measure. Lucia met her eyes, those storm-gray eyes that seemed to hold the weight of every unwritten verdict, and felt the pull, that treacherous gravity she'd been fighting since her first day. "Just wondering why my work always seems to miss the mark for you, Miss Hargrove. The rest of the team doesn't get the full autopsy." It was bolder than she'd intended, the words slipping out like rain through a faulty gutter. Eloan's lips thinned, but there was no fire, only a flicker of something deeper, like embers under ash. "Because I expect more from you. Mediocrity is a luxury this town can't afford, and neither can you." She rose then, smoothing her skirt with a gesture that was all poise, and swept out, leaving Lucia with the echo of her heels on the hardwood and the nagging certainty that she'd just stepped into quicksand. The weeks blurred into a humid haze of depositions and discovery motions, the firm's caseload a relentless tide pulling at the edges of Lucia's resolve. She threw herself into the work, poring over precedents until her eyes burned, determined to prove she wasn't the liability Eloan seemed to see. Late nights became her ritual, the office a ghost town after 7, lit only by the green glow of her desk lamp and the distant hum of the river traffic. It was on one such evening, 3 months into the Fletcher estate dispute, a bitter inheritance fight between a steel magnate's widow and his bastard son from the wrong side of the tracks, that Lucia first glimpsed the fracture in Eloan's facade. The widow, Mrs. Beaumont, no relation to Harlan thank God, had cornered Lucia in the file room, her voice a tremulous whine about family honor, and how the boy was dragging the name through the mud. Lucia nodded through it, her empathy fraying like old lace, until Mrs. Beaumont clutched her arm and whispered, "You understand, don't you, dear? Some things we do for love, even when they cage us." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Lucia's thoughts as she escaped to the balcony overlooking the courtyard, where azaleas drooped under the weight of summer's end. Eloan was there, of course, a silhouette against the twilight, a cigarette burning low between her fingers, a vice she hid from the world like a shameful prayer. She didn't turn at Lucia's approach, but her shoulders tensed, the smoke curling upward in lazy defiance of the still air. "Mrs. Beaumont give you the full tragic monologue?" Lucia leaned on the railing, the iron cool against her palms. "Something about love being a cage. Sound familiar?" A pause heavy as the gathering dusk. "Love's never that simple in Monroe. It's a transaction half the time. You pay in silences, and hope the interest doesn't bankrupt you." Eloan's voice was low, threaded with weariness, and for the first time Lucia heard the crack, the human beneath the armor. They stood there until the stars pricked through the clouds, talking in fragments about cases and the town's endless hypocrisies, the conversation skirting edges neither dared cross. It was the closest they'd come to truce, and as Lucia drove home to her cramped apartment above the laundromat, the radio crooning Patsy Cline, she wondered if the hate she'd felt was just fear in disguise. Fear of wanting what she couldn't have, in a town that punished such wants with exile. But Monroe had other plans. The next morning brought the Beaumont wedding anniversary gala, an obligatory swirl of crystal glasses and whispered alliances at the Delta Grand Hotel. Lucia had begged off, citing a brief deadline, but Eloan had insisted. Part of the job, Riz. Networking isn't optional. So there she was in a borrowed black dress that hugged too close for comfort, weaving through the crowd of pearl clutchers and good old boys, the air thick with bourbon and the faint rot of privilege. Harlan Beaumont held court near the bar, his laugh booming like cannon fire, a hand possessively on Eloan's waist as she smiled that perfect, painted smile. Lucia watched from the shadows, nursing a gin and tonic that burned less than the ache in her chest. Eloan caught her eye across the room, a fleeting glance that lingered too long, charged with something unspoken. Then Harlan pulled her closer, his lips brushing her ear, and the moment shattered like fine china underfoot. Lucia slipped out early, the night air slapping her face like a rebuke. In her car, engine idling under the hotel's porte-cochere, she let the tears come, not for Eloan, not yet, but for the girl she'd been, who believed love could be uncomplicated, unjudged. Little did she know, the storm was just gathering force. The Washita River ran sluggish and tea-colored under the autumn sun, mirroring the slow churn of Lucia's thoughts as she trailed Eloan through the courthouse corridors the following Monday. The Fletcher case had hit a snag, a surprise witness from the son's side, claiming buried letters that could upend the widow's claim, and Eloan's stride was purposeful, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to verdict. Lucia matched her pace, briefcase swinging at her side, the weight of unspoken words from the gala pressing heavier than any docket. "You vanished last night," Eloan said without preamble, pushing through the heavy oak doors to the clerk's office. No accusation, just fact, delivered with that cool precision that made Lucia's skin prickle. "Deadlines wait for no gala," Lucia replied, forcing lightness into her voice as she scanned the microfiche reels for the probate records. The room smelled of dust and faded ink, a tomb for the town's forgotten scandals. Besides, Harlan looked like he had you covered. Eloan's hand paused on a drawer pull, her back to Lucia, and when she turned there was a shadow in her eyes like clouds scudding over the bayou. Harlan covers what needs covering. It's the nature of things here. She pulled the file, her movements efficient, but Lucia caught the tremor in her fingers, faint as a whisper. They worked in tandem that day, piecing together the widow's defense like a patchwork quilt, stitches of evidence pulled tight against the unraveling threads of truth. By afternoon, sequestered in Eloan's corner office with its view of the pecan groves bending in the breeze, the barriers began to erode. Eloan poured coffee from a silver thermos, black and scalding, and slid a mug across the desk. You did good work on the timeline, Reyes. Clean. Precise. Lucia blinked, the praise landing awkward as an ill-timed rain. Coming from you, that's practically a medal of honor. A ghost of a smile tugged at Eloan's lips, softening the lines etched by years of calculated risks. Don't get used to it. Flatteries for clients. But she lingered, leaning back in her chair, the leather creaking like a confession. The conversation veered, as it had on the balcony, to the town's undercurrents. The way old families like the Beaumonts hoarded influence like storm cellars stocked for hurricane season. The quiet bigotry that simmered beneath Sunday potlucks and PTA meetings. Lucia spoke of Houston then, unbidden, the words spilling out like floodwater after a levee break. My mommy used to say home was where the saints watched over you, but in Monroe it feels like they're judging instead. She traced the rim of her mug, steam rising in fragile curls. You ever feel that? Like you're playing a part in someone else's script. Eloan's gaze drifted to the window, where leaves spiraled down in lazy descent. Every day. This town. It's a beautiful trap. Lace curtains over barred windows. Her voice dipped, laced with a bitterness that tasted of long-held grief. I married into it young, thinking it would anchor me. Harlan was safe. Respected. The kind of match that keeps the whispers at bay. Lucia held her breath, the air between them thickening with the weight of what wasn't said. Safe. The word echoed, a hollow bell tolling for choices made in shadows. She wanted to reach across the desk, to bridge that chasm with a touch, but the ghost of Harlan's hand on Eloan's waist at the gala held her back. Instead, she nodded, filing the moment away like evidence in a sealed envelope. The thaw continued in fits and starts. Mornings brought barked orders over case files, but evenings, those stolen hours when the office emptied, unraveled into something softer. They'd share takeout from Miss May's diner, gumbo thick with okra and regret, trading stories that skirted the personal like fireflies dodging the net. Eloan spoke of her girlhood in the Hargrove manse, summers spent riding bareback through the cotton fields, the freedom of wind-whipped hair before the weight of expectation settled like dust on an heirloom. Lucia countered with tales of border crossings, her father's truck radio blasting Selena as they evaded checkpoints, the thrill of arrival laced with the terror of uprooting. It was intoxicating, this proximity, a slow burn that Lucia stoked in secret. At night, in her apartment where the walls thrummed with the spin cycles below, she'd replay Eloan's laughter, a rare, throaty sound that cut through the tension like moonlight on water. Desire crept in uninvited, a vine twisting through the cracks of her resolve. She imagined Eloan's hands not on files or Harlan's arm, but on her own skin, mapping the terrain of scars and secrets. It was folly, she knew. Eloan was married, untouchable, a beacon in a storm Lucia had no business sailing toward. Yet the pull was magnetic, born of shared silences and the town's oppressive gaze. The first real fracture came mid-October, during a pro bono clinic at the community center on the east side, where the river's bend cradled the poorer quarters in its muddy embrace. Lucia volunteered there monthly, helping tenants fight evictions from landlords who preyed on the desperate. Eloan had shown up unannounced, her Mercedes an anomaly among the rusted pickups, clipboard in hand like a shield. Thought you could use backup, she'd said, and together they navigated the line of weary faces. Single mothers with toddlers on hips, elders clutching faded leases like lifelines. One client, a wiry woman named Delphine with eyes like chipped flint, poured out her story. Evicted for moral lapses after her daughter came out at school, the landlord citing church bylaws in the lease fine print. Lucia's blood boiled, her arguments sharp as she drafted the countersuit, but it was Eloan's quiet fury that lingered. As they packed up, rain pattering on the tin roof, Delphine gripped Eloan's arm. "Y'all fight for us, but who fights for you when the world's too small?" Eloan pulled away gently, her smile brittle. "We manage, ma'am. Always do." But in the car, windows fogged against the downpour, she gripped the wheel until her knuckles blanched. That lease clause. It's archaic, unenforceable, but they wield it like a cross. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Lucia reached out, her hand covering Eloan's on the gearshift, a touch electric, fleeting. "You don't have to manage alone," Lucia murmured, the words a bridge too far too soon. Eloan withdrew, starting the engine with a roar that drowned the rain. In Monroe, alone is the only safe harbor. The drive back was silent, charged with the ozone scent of lightning about to strike. That weekend, Lucia fled to the bayous, renting a pirogue from Old Man Thibodeau and poling through the cypress knees until the world narrowed to water and whisper. The paddle cut smooth arcs, her muscles burning in rhythm with her thoughts. Eloan haunted her. Not the boss, but the woman glimpsed in fragments. The one who hummed gospel tunes under her breath while reviewing motions, who slipped extra cash into the clinic's donation jar when no one watched. It was dangerous, this tenderness blooming in barren soil, but Lucia couldn't prune it back. Not when every glance exchanged in the office felt like a stolen breath. Harlan's shadow lengthened as autumn deepened. Invitations to Beaumont dinners arrived like summons, and Eloan began canceling late meetings, her excuses laced with fatigue. Lucia overheard snippets in the break room. Harlan's practice expanding, a gala for the hospital foundation, the endless dance of social obligations. Jealousy coiled in her gut, not of the marriage but of its claim, the way it tethered Eloan to a life that dimmed her light. The night it broke open was unremarkable at first. A Thursday, the office clock ticking past 9 as Lucia finalized the Fletcher rebuttal. Eloan had stayed late too, her door ajar, the lamplight spilling golden across the hall. Lucia knocked softly, file in hand. "Last piece for tomorrow." Eloan looked up from her desk, face drawn, a half-empty glass of bourbon at her elbow. "Another secret vice. Leave it. We'll review in the morning." But her voice wavered, and when Lucia stepped closer, she saw the tear tracks, faint but fresh, glistening like dew on porcelain. "Miss Hargrove." "Eloan," she corrected, the name a surrender. "Just Eloan tonight." Lucia set the file down, perching on the desk's edge, close enough to smell the bourbon and the faint lavender of her perfume. "What's wrong?" A laugh bitter as chicory. "Everything. Harlan. The wedding. It's all a lie, Lucia. A godforsaken performance for a town that would burn us at the stake if they knew." The words tumbled out then, a dam breached. The marriage at 22, arranged by family whispers to bury the rumors of her college dalliance with a sorority sister. The night spent in separate wings of the Beaumont house, Harlan's affairs with nurses a polite fiction they both ignored. The ache of living half a life, loving in shadows while Monroe's spotlight demanded perfection. Lucia listened, heart pounding, as Eloan wept, raw, unfiltered sobs that shook the foundations of the woman she'd idolized and feared. When the storm passed, Eloan reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining like roots seeking soil. "I thought you hated me," Lucia whispered, the old wound surfacing. "Never hate," Eloan replied, her thumb tracing Lucia's knuckles. "Fear, maybe, of seeing too much of myself in you." In that moment, under the office's watchful fluorescence, the world shifted. Lips met tentatively, a kiss born of salt and longing, tasting of bourbon and the river's promise. It was a beginning, fragile as Spanish moss but real. Outside, the wind howled through the pecans, carrying the first chill of winter, and Lucia wondered if freedom ever came without cost. Winter wrapped Monroe in a deceptive hush, the kind that muffled footsteps but amplified heartbeats. And in the stolen spaces between court dates and client calls, Lucia and Eloan carved out a secret rhythm. It began with texts at odd hours, Eloan's coffee run, masking the undercurrent of need, and evolved into drives along the river levee, where the water's lap against the bank drowned out the town's prying ears. They'd park under the willows, windows cracked to the frost-kissed air, Hands linked across the console as Elowen recounted the suffocations of her youth. Debutante balls where she'd waltzed with boys while dreaming of the maid's daughter slipping notes in her corsage, the Hargrove Bible thumping on the nightstand like a judge's gavel. Lucia shared in turn, her stories a bridge from Houston's heat to Monroe's chill. The first time she'd held a girl's hand at a quinceañera, the confessional booth where forgiveness felt like chains. "I ran because staying meant dying a little each day," she said one evening, fog blooming on the windshield as they watched barges glide past like ghosts on the Washita. Elowen's reply was a kiss, fierce and claiming, her fingers threading through Lucia's hair with a hunger that spoke of years starved. The office became their tightrope. By day, Elowen was the unflappable partner, her critiques of Lucia's briefs now laced with a private glint, a nod that said later. Lucia bloomed under it, her arguments in mock court sharper, her presence in meetings a quiet command. The team noticed the shift, whispers of favoritism rippled through the break room, but Lucia shrugged them off, attributing the glow to the season's rare sunbreaks. Only in the mirror did she see the truth. Eyes brighter, shoulders looser, the weight of solitude lifting like morning mist. But secrets in Monroe fermented, turning sweet to sour under pressure. Harlan's suspicions brewed subtly. A longer glance at Lucia during a firm dinner, Elowen's late nights explained away with caseload excuses that grew threadbare. He was a man of surfaces, Harlan Beaumont, broad-shouldered surgeon with a drawl polished at Vanderbilt, his charm a scalpel dissecting insecurities. Their marriage had been a merger, not a match, Hargrove name for Beaumont respectability, and he'd tolerated the chill between them as long as it served the facade. Now, with the hospital's expansion demanding more public unity, tolerance frayed. The first warning came at the firm's holiday mixer, held in the Delta Grand's ballroom where chandeliers dripped light like honeyed venom. Lucia arrived late, her wool coat dusted with the first snow flurries, and found Elowen cornered by Harlan near the punch bowl. His hand rested heavy on her elbow, voice low but carrying, "Darlin', you've been scarce. Work or wanderlust?" The laugh that followed was all teeth, and Elowen's smile matched it, brittle as spun sugar. Lucia hovered at the periphery, circulating with small talk about the caseload, but her gaze kept drifting back. When Harlan pulled Elowen onto the dance floor for the annual waltz, tradition he called it, eyes locking on Lucia as if daring her to watch, she felt the room tilt. The music swelled, strings sawing at her nerves, and she excused herself to the terrace, the cold slapping her flushed cheeks. Footsteps followed, soft but sure, and Elowen was there, wrap slipping from her shoulders. "He suspects something," Elowen said, no preamble, her breath clouding the air. "Not you, not yet, but the distance. I've been careful, but..." Lucia pulled her close, the fur of the wrap tickling her chin. "Then let's be less careful. Somewhere else. New Orleans, Baton Rouge. Anywhere the river runs freer." Elowen's laugh was a sigh, her forehead pressing to Lucia's. "And leave the firm? The life I've built on sand? It's not that simple, Lucia. This town owns pieces of me I can't just reclaim." The kiss that followed was desperate, a clash of lips and lingering doubts, but it anchored them, if only for the night. They parted before Harlan noticed, Elowen gliding back inside with a grace that masked the tremor in her step. Lucia stayed on the terrace longer, staring at the snow-dusted oaks, the weight of not simple settling like lead in her veins. January brought the Fletcher trial, a whirlwind of objections and sidebars that bound them closer in the crucible of combat. In the courthouse's marbled halls with Judge Harlan's, their Harlan, a distant cousin, presiding, they were a seamless unit, Elowen leading with surgical strikes, Lucia threading the needle with cross-exams that left the bastard son stammering. Victory came on a Friday, the jury's deliberation barely 2 hours, and the widow's tearful gratitude in the lobby felt like absolution. They celebrated quietly, a bottle of bourbon in Elowen's office after hours, the building empty save for the janitor's distant vacuum hum. Toasts turned to touches, hands wandering under the desk, and when Elowen locked the door with a click that echoed like fate, the line blurred irrevocably. They moved to the leather sofa, a tangle of limbs and whispered names, the act a revelation, tender where Lucia had feared frenzy, profound where doubt had whispered cheap. Elowen's body was a landscape of stories, Faint scars from childhood falls in the stables, the curve of her hip a testament to uncharted desires. Lucia traced them with reverence, her own skin alive under Eloan's gaze, the vulnerability a gift wrapped in trust. Afterward, spent and sated, they lay entwined, the city lights flickering through the blinds like distant fireflies. "This is madness," Eloan murmured, her fingers idly stroking Lucia's arm. "Beautiful but mad." "Worth it," Lucia replied, pressing a kiss to her collarbone. "Every risk. But risk has teeth." The new year dawned with Harlan's ultimatum, delivered over breakfast at the Beaumont estate, a sprawling plantation revival on the river's bend, its columns shadowed by live oaks draped in resurrection fern. Eloan recounted it later, voice steady but eyes hollow. Demands for more appearances, a family vacation to the Keys, subtle probes about that ambitious little associate shadowing her at work. "He's circling Lucia. And Monroe's his pond." Lucia's response was resolve, forged in the fire of their nights. She proposed a plan over gumbo at a hole-in-the-wall off Highway 165. Gather evidence of Harlan's indiscretions, nurses' whispers, credit card trails to New Orleans hotels, and leverage it for a quiet divorce. "No scandal, just freedom. You deserve that." Eloan hesitated, the steam from her bowl curling like hesitation. "And the firm? The Hargroves? They'd crucify me for abandoning a good man." "Then let them. You're more than their ghost." The words lingered, a seed planted in reluctant soil. Their affair deepened in defiance, weekends at a cabin Eloan owned in the Kisatchie National Forest, where pine-scented air and crackling fire stripped away the town's veneer. There, under star-pricked skies, they dreamed aloud. Eloan partnering fully, Lucia rising beside her, a life unscripted by whispers. Laughter came easier, touches lingered, and for stolen hours, Monroe's chains felt like illusions. Yet illusions shatter. February's thaw brought Delphine's countersuit to a head, the landlord folding under pressure, and the victory party at the community center drew eyes, Harlan's among them, tipped off by a gossiping volunteer. He confronted Eloan that night at home, accusations flying like buckshot. "That Reyes girl, is she the reason you're pulling away?" Some phased to spice up the boredom. Eloan's denial was ironclad, but the seed of doubt took root. The next day at the office, her distance was palpable. Meetings clipped, glances averted. Lucia cornered her in the file room, the air thick with must and tension. "Talk to me." "It's too close," Eloan whispered, backing against the shelves. "He knows something. And if he digs, then we face it. Together." Lucia stepped forward, but Eloan held up a hand, palm out like a ward. "Not yet. I need time." The rejection stung, a slap in slow motion, and Lucia nodded, retreating with the burn of unshed tears. The rift widened, days bleeding into a cold war of professional courtesy. Lucia threw herself into a new pro bono, defending a trans teen from a custody battle laced with biblical barbs, the case a mirror to her own fractures. Eloan's support came via memos, terse but telling, a lifeline thrown from afar. The breaking point arrived with Mardi Gras, the town's brief flirtation with abandon. Eloan invited Lucia to a masked ball at the Grand, anonymity their shield. Amid the feathers and beads they danced, bodies pressed in the crush, masks hiding the hunger in their eyes. But Harlan was there, unmasked, his gaze a hawk's on Eloan's laughter. When he pulled her aside, Lucia watched from the balcony, heart hammering as raised voices carried on the jazz-soaked air. "You think I don't see it? The late nights, the glow? End it, Elle. Before I make it public." Harlan's words, venomous and final. Eloan returned pale, mask dangling from her fingers. "We can't," she said later, in the dim of Lucia's apartment, the beignet cooling untouched on the table. "Not like this. He'd ruin you, the firm, everything." Lucia's world narrowed to the pain in Eloan's eyes, the betrayal not of her, but of the life that owned her. "Then fight for us." "I am," Eloan pleaded, tears carving paths through powder. "But Monroe doesn't let go easy." As she left, the door clicking shut like a verdict, Lucia sank to the floor, the mask's feathers mocking her from the chair. The affair, once aflame, now smoldered with doubt, and the town's shadows lengthened, hungry for the kill. Spring erupted in Monroe with a vengeance, azaleas bleeding pink against the river's swell, but the bloom masked rot, the kind that festers in hidden places, turning affection to accusation. Lucia navigated the office like a minefield, Eloan's proximity a torment of brushed shoulders and loaded silences. The Mardi Gras confrontation had erected walls, Harlan's threat a specter looming over every glance, and Eloan retreated into the role of untouchable partner, her smiles for clients only, her nights presumably back in the Beaumont fold. Lucia coped by immersion, the trans teen's custody case consuming her days in frantic filings and whispered strategy sessions with advocates from Baton Rouge. The girl, Riley, was 16 with eyes like fractured glass, her mother's evangelical fervor a battering ram against her father's reluctant allyship. Lucia saw echoes of her own youth in Riley's defiance, the scrawled journal entries about stolen kisses with a classmate, the prayers begged for normalcy that never came. "They want to fix me," Riley said during a recess, voice small in the courthouse bathroom's echo. "But I'm not broken. You're whole," Lucia assured her, kneeling to meet her gaze, the tile cold under her knees. "And we'll prove it." The words were for Riley, but they anchored Lucia too. A reminder that battles worth fighting left scars but not surrender. Eloan watched from afar, her involvement limited to approving motions, but Lucia caught the flicker in her eyes during case reviews, the ache of solidarity unspoken. One afternoon as rain lashed the windows during a strategy huddle, Eloan's pen tapped a Morse code of regret on the blotter. After the others left, she lingered. "How's Riley holding?" "Stronger than she knows," Lucia replied, stacking notes with care. The air hummed charged with the unsaid. Eloan nodded then. "I'm sorry. For the distance." Harlan's. Insistent. Therapy sessions, couples retreats. He's building a case for the narrative, painting me as the distracted wife. Lucia's throat tightened. "And what's the truth worth to you?" A beat, heavy as the storm outside. "More than you know. But I need to handle this my way." She reached then, a ghost of a touch on Lucia's wrist, before withdrawing like a tide. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Lucia with the patter of rain and the hollow of what-ifs. Harlan's pressure mounted, manifesting in subtle sabotage, anonymous tips to the Bar Association about ethical lapses at the firm, whispers at the country club that Eloan's distractions were tanking cases. The Fletcher wind soured when the widow, in a fit of paranoia, accused Lucia of leaking details to the press, a rumor Harlan fanned with well-placed calls. Eloan quashed it publicly, her defense of Lucia in the partners' meeting a rare blaze. "Ms. Reyes is the firm's backbone. Question her, and you question me." The gesture cracked the ice, and that night, they met at the cabin in Kisatchie, the drive a blur of backroads and resolve. Eloan arrived first, fire already crackling in the stone hearth, her coat discarded like shed skin. "I filed preliminary papers," she announced, handing Lucia a manila envelope, the ink still fresh on the separation agreement. Quietly. "No fault, minimal assets. Harlan signed this morning. Grateful for the out, I think." Lucia scanned the pages, relief flooding like sunlight after eclipse. "You did it." "We did." Eloan's arms encircled her. The kiss a homecoming, bodies rediscovering paths once trod in haste. The cabin's walls, rough-hewn pine, absorbed their murmurs, the night unfolding in layers of reclaiming, slow explorations by firelight, laughter bubbling up between gasps, the world reduced to skin and spark. Dawn brought tentative plans. Eloan moving into a pied-a-terre downtown. The firm restructured to weather the gossip. "We'll go slow," she said over coffee on the porch, steam mingling with the mist rising from the forest floor. "Announce when the dust settles. Riley's trial first, focus there." Lucia agreed, buoyed by the possibility, but Monroe's underbelly stirred. The custody hearing loomed, a powder keg in Judge Harlan's courtroom. Yes, their Harlan, blood tied to the surgeon making impartiality a farce. He presided with a gavel that fell like judgment, his rulings tilting toward the mother despite evidence of Riley's stability with her father. Lucia's closing argument was a masterstroke, weaving psych evals and witness testimonies into a tapestry of resilience, but the verdict hung by a thread. It snapped on the stand when the mother's pastor testified, Bible in hand, decrying unnatural influences in the home, the father's leniency toward Riley's confusion, a dog whistle for the court's conservative lean. Harlan sustained objections with relish, his eyes flicking to Lucia as if measuring her own secrets. Eloan in the gallery gripped the bench until her nails bit wood. They lost. Riley's sobs in the hallway echoed like a dirge, her father murmuring apologies as social services loomed. Lucia knelt again, this time in defeat. This isn't over. Appeals media, we fight. But Riley's eyes, once fractured, now shattered. You can't fix everything, Ms. Reyes. Some cages don't break. Eloan pulled strings that night, calling in favors from Baton Rouge contacts for an expedited appeal. But the loss carved deep. At the cabin later, wine loosening tongues, Eloan confessed her own ghosts. Harlan's family, they're like that pastor. Blood thicker than mercy. If they knew about us. They won't, Lucia vowed, drawing her close. But doubt seeded, watered by the trial's fallout. Gossip swelled, the firm's liberal leanings blamed for the loss, clients drifting to competitors. Harlan, sensing weakness, escalated. A late-night call to Eloan, voice oily with false concern. Heard about the custody mess. That Reyes stirring pots she shouldn't. Careful, Elle. Town's watching. The threat coiled and Eloan's resolve wavered. Mornings brought strained breakfasts at the diner, her eyes shadowed by sleepless strategy. Lucia pushed back, organizing a benefit for Riley's legal fund at the community center, drawing queer advocates from Shreveport. The event buzzed, donations poured in, toasts raised to resilience, but Harlan crashed it, arriving by chance with a check and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He cornered Lucia by the coffee urn, bourbon on his breath despite the hour. Admirable work, Ms. Reyes, but meddling in family matters. It backfires. Ask Elle, she knows. His hand clapped her shoulder, grip lingering like a warning, before he sauntered to Eloan, planting a paternal kiss on her cheek for the crowd. That night, the betrayal unfolded. Eloan arrived at Lucia's apartment unannounced, face ashen, a flash drive in her trembling hand. He recorded us. The cabin somehow a drone or a tale. Audio only, thank God, but enough. He's threatening exposure unless I recant the separation, play the dutiful wife through his expansion gala. Lucia's stomach plummeted, the room spinning. The bastard. We go public first, press conference, the works. No. Eloan's voice broke, tears spilling. It'd destroy the firm, Riley's appeal, everything. I have to go back. For now. The words landed like a blade, severing the fragile weave of their future. Lucia staggered back, betrayal's bitter taste flooding her mouth. You choose him? After everything. Not him, survival. Eloan reached, but Lucia flinched. Lucia, please. It's temporary. A shield until I can. Get out. The door slammed, echoing the slam of her heart's gates. Alone, Lucia curled on the bed, sobs racking her frame. The flash drive's contents a ghost she couldn't face. Betrayal wasn't Harlan's alone. It was Eloan's capitulation, the fear that trumped their fire. Dawn crept in, gray and unforgiving, and with it, a resolve hardening like river clay. She wouldn't wait in shadows. Riley's fight, her own, they demanded light. Consequences be damned. At the office, she tendered resignation, citing personal pursuits. But her eyes met Eloan's across the bullpen, a silent gauntlet. Monroe's spring bloomed on, indifferent, but Lucia's winter raged within, the path to freedom paved with thorns she was ready to tread. Summer scorched Monroe into submission, the air a thick soup of heat and honeysuckle that clung like regret, and Lucia's departure from Hargrove and Associates rippled through the town like a stone skipped across the Washita, small splash but waves that lapped at every shore. She didn't burn bridges, instead she kindled new ones, hanging a shingle from a rented space above the old pharmacy on Desired Street, her practice a beacon for the marginalized. Evictions for lifestyle clauses, custody scraps laced with prejudice, the quiet wars of the overlooked. Clients trickled in at first, Delphine with referrals, Riley's father seeking appeal ammunition, but word spread, fueled by the custody losses backlash, and soon her waiting room hummed with stories begging to be weaponized. Eloan watched from across town, her office now a cage of glass walls and echoing silences. The separation papers gathered dust in a drawer, Harlan's recordings a sword of Damocles she couldn't disarm. She'd return to the Beaumont estate, the routine a numbing balm. Breakfasts of polite conversation over poached eggs. Galas where his hand on her arm felt like manacles. But nights brought dreams of Lucia's touch, waking her in sweats. The bed's expanse a void she filled with case files until dawn. Their encounters were accidental at first. A case overlap in family court, where Lucia's cross-exam of a bigoted guardian ad litem drew Alohan's admiring nod from the gallery. Eyes met across the aisle, charged with the static of unfinished symphonies, and afterward in the shadowed hallway, Alohan murmured, "Your practice, it's making waves." Lucia, briefcase clutched like armor, replied coolly, "Waves beat stagnation." But her pulse betrayed her, hammering at the proximity, the scent of lavender stirring ghosts. Harlan's grip tightened with the heat, his expansion gala a fortnight away. A black tie affair at the country club, donors wooed with promises of gleaming wings and whispered deals. He paraded Alohan as trophy, her gown a sheath of emerald silk that whispered of captivity, and the recordings became currency. Smile Pretty L. Or Ms. Reyes gets an unsolicited playlist. Alohan plotted in fragments, consulting a Shreveport PI for counter-surveillance, squirreling assets into trusts, but isolation gnawed. She drove past Lucia's building one midnight, the windows aglow with lamplight, and nearly knocked the ache of physical wound. Instead she idled, radio crooning Billie Holiday's Lament, until tears blurred the neon sign. Reyes advocacy. Lucia's world spun faster, a vortex of purpose laced with pain. Riley's appeal gained traction, bolstered by amicus briefs from queer rights groups, and Lucia mentored the girl through virtual check-ins. Their talks a salve for her own fractures. "You ever think about running?" Riley asked once, voice pixelated on the screen. "Every day," Lucia admitted, the apartment's fan whirring like confession. "But fighting's in my blood. My parents crossed deserts for a chance. I owe it to them to claim mine." Nights were harder, the bed a battlefield of memories. Alohan's weight atop her, breaths mingling in the cabin's hush. Lucia dated tentatively, a barista from the coffee shop, all easy smiles and no depths. But it fizzled, the comparison unfair but inevitable. Betrayal's scar throbbed, a reminder that love in Monroe demanded sacrifice, and she'd paid in full. The gala loomed like a guillotine, and Harlan invited Lucia, professional courtesy. His note read, laced with barbs about networking opportunities. She declined, citing a deposition, but Alohan cornered her at the courthouse steps days prior. Heels sinking into the lawn's soft earth. "Come, please. It's a declaration." Lucia's laugh was sharp, edged with hurt. "Of what?" "Your triumphant return to the fold." Alohan's eyes, shadowed by fatigue, pleaded. "Of us. I'll end it there, publicly if I must. The recordings. I've got leverage now. Just be there." The request hung, a lifeline or a noose. Lucia waited through sleepless hours, the town's pulse quickening with pre-gala buzz. String quartets tuning, caterers hauling ice in the swelter. Riley texted encouragement. "Be the storm, Ms. R." And Delphine dropped by with tamales, her grip firm. "Don't let fear cook your courage." She went. The country club sprawled on the river's curve, its lawns manicured to perfection, fairy lights twinkling against the dusk like false stars. Lucia arrived in a simple black sheath, hair loose, the outfit armor against the crowd's opulent plumage. Harlan spotted her immediately, weaving through with a flute of champagne. His smile a veneer over steel. "Ms. Reyes. Bold of you to show. Elle said you might." "Curiosity," she replied, sipping to steady her nerves. "An unfinished business." He chuckled, low and knowing. "Ah yes. The boss who hated you. Funny how perceptions shift." The jab landed, but Lucia held ground, scanning for Alohan amid the swirl. There on the veranda, radiant in emerald, Harlan's arm a temporary prop. The evening unfolded in tableaus. Toasts to progress, Harlan's speech on healing divides, ringing hollow as gunshots. Lucia circulated, fielding probes from donors. "Heard you're the new firebrand." Her responses measured, probing for allies. Then the quartet struck up a waltz and Harlan led Alohan out, their steps practiced, her gaze seeking Lucia's across the floor. It was during the third movement that the crack appeared. Harlan's whisper in Eloan's ear turned her pale, his grip tightening as he steered her toward the shadows. Lucia followed at distance, heart thudding, slipping into the garden's labyrinth of boxwoods where cicadas droned like omens. She found them by the fountain, water gurgling mockery. Harlan's back to her, voice a hiss. And if you think that little stunt with the PI scares me, think again. I've got copies, Elle. Everywhere. One word, and your precious associate's career drowns. Eloan's reply was steel. Enough, Harlan. The papers are filed. This charade ends tonight. He whirled, spotting Lucia then, his face twisting. You. Eavesdropping now? Perfect. Join the family drama. He lunged for his phone, thumb hovering over send, but Eloan intercepted, wrenching it free. No more, she said, voice carrying like a verdict. With deliberate calm, she dropped it into the fountain, the splash a punctuation. Harlan lunged, but Lucia stepped forward, stance wide. Touch her, and you'll need more than recordings to fix the damage. The standoff crackled, Harlan's fury a live wire. You have no idea the hell I'll unleash. This town, my town, will bury you both. Let them try. Eloan's hand found Lucia's, fingers lacing in solidarity, the touch a spark igniting the dry tinder of resolve. Harlan stormed off, curses trailing like smoke, and in his wake, the garden held only the fountain's murmur and their ragged breaths. I meant it, Eloan whispered, turning to Lucia, tears silver in the moonlight. No more cages. They kissed then, not with the frenzy of before, but with the gravity of survivors, lips brushing like oaths, bodies aligning as anchors. The gala's music drifted, a distant serenade, but they lingered in the green hush, the night's violence birthing clarity. Harlan's retaliation came swift. By morning, emails circulated, grainy audio snippets, blurred but damning, hitting inboxes from the bar to the society pages. Whispers ignited. Hargrove's scandal, Beaumont's sham. The firm teetered, clients fleeing, partners demanding explanations. Eloan faced the board with chin-high, resignation in hand. I'll step down. Rebuild elsewhere. But I won't apologize for living. Lucia stood beside her, unbidden but unwavering, the room shock a wave they rode together. Outside, Monroe buzzed, reporters at the gates, allies emerging from the woodwork. Riley called, voice fierce. You did it. Broke the cage. But breaking invited backlash. Harlan sued for defamation, citing emotional distress, his filings a blizzard of legalese. The town divided. Old guard closing ranks, progressives rallying with petitions. Eloan and Lucia holed up in the pied a terra, plotting counters over takeout, their nights a blend of strategy and solace. Bodies entwined not in desperation, but in the quiet certainty of chosen paths. Yet the climax brewed in the courts. Harlan sued a proxy for deeper vendettas. As depositions loomed, Eloan confessed over dawn coffee, voice threaded with old fears. What if we lose more than the case? The life we're building. Lucia cupped her face, thumbs tracing jawline. Then we build again. Stronger. This is our story now, no scripts but ours. The words were talisman, carrying them into the fray, where betrayal's ashes fertilized ground for truth's hard-won bloom. Autumn returned to Monroe like a reckoning, leaves turning crimson along the Washita as if the river itself bled for the wounds laid bare. Harlan's lawsuit dragged through preliminaries, a spectacle that packed the courthouse with gawkers and gadflies, the air electric with schadenfreude and silent sympathies. Eloan and Lucia countered with surgical precision, affidavits from the PI exposing Harlan's own infidelities, medical logs of his stress-induced absences that masked bourbon benders. The recordings, once weapons, became exhibits, their grainy intimacy reframed as evidence of coercion, not scandal. The media frenzy crested mid-October, headlines in the Monroe News Star shifting from local elite's betrayal to southern towns reckoning with hidden lives. Allies surfaced. The widow from the Fletcher case donating to their defense fund, Delphine organizing vigils outside the club, her signs proclaiming love ain't no crime. Riley, now 17 and thriving in a New Orleans foster program Lucia had helped secure, testified remotely, her words a clarion. They taught me shame's the real cage. Ms. Hargrove and Ms. Reyes? They handed me the key. Through it their bond tempered in fire, mornings strategizing over beignets at Miss May's, where stares met smiles, evenings in the pied à terre, where touches mapped not just desire but endurance. Aloan shed layers, her laughter freer, the bourbon traded for herbal tea. Lucia watched her unfold, the woman once armored now vulnerable in the best way, scars bared like badges. Harlan cracked first, the strain etching lines around his eyes during his deposition. Under Lucia's relentless questioning, calm, inexorable as the river's current, he unraveled. Admissions of surveillance born of paranoia, affairs justified as marital mercy, the suit a desperate grasp at control. You think you can dismantle a lifetime? He spat, face florid. This town built me. Lucia leaned in, voice steady. It built the lie. Time for truth. The case settled out of court days later, Harlan withdrawing claims, assets divided in quiet arbitration, a gag order sealing his venom. The firm survived, rebranded under new partners who welcomed Aloan's return as consultant, her expertise untainted by the storm. Lucia's practice flourished, a hub for the town's quiet revolutions, her waiting room a tapestry of faces once silenced. But victory's afterglow carried shadows. Whispers lingered at the grocery, judgmental glances at the pump, and Aloan's family, distant Hargrove aunts with pursed lips, sent letters laced with scripture and sorrow. You've shamed us. One read, postmarked from Natchez. Aloan burned it in the sink, flames dancing like defiant sprites, but the ash clung, a reminder that freedom's price was eternal vigilance. They marked the settlement with a drive to Kisatchie, the cabin a sanctuary reclaimed. Fall's chill nipped the air, bonfire sparks ascending like released prayers. Over Esmeralda sticky with memory, Aloan spoke of futures. A joint practice perhaps, or relocation to New Orleans' embrace. No more hiding, she vowed, marshmallow smudged on her lip. Lucia kissed it away, the gesture simple, profound. No more. Just us. Winter whispered in with the first frost, and Monroe softened at the edges. Potlucks inviting them now, tentative bridges from neighbors who'd chosen sides but circled back. Riley visited for Thanksgiving, her hug fierce, the table groaning under tamales and turducken, laughter a balm over old hurts. Yet the human core emerged not in triumph, but in fractures mending. One December eve, snow rare and fleeting dusting the sill, Aloan woke from a nightmare, Harlan's face morphing into her father's, accusations blurring. Lucia held her through the tremors, rocking like a lullaby. We're the story now, she murmured. And it's ours to write. Aloan surfaced, eyes clear in the lamplight. I was so afraid of losing the name, the place. But you showed me home's not a house or a town. It's this. Her hand over Lucia's heart, the beat a shared rhythm. The year closed on New Year's, the river fireworks blooming like hesitant hopes. They watched from the levee, bundled in wool, champagne flutes clinking under stars. To beginnings, Lucia toasted. To us, Aloan echoed, and in that word lay the arc. From hate's illusion to love's labor, through betrayals forged to humanity's quiet grace. Monroe endured, its standards cracked but standing, a testament that even in divides deep as bayous, light finds purchase. Lucia and Aloan walked forward, hands linked, not unscathed but unbroken, proof that the truest rebellion is living unapologized, the heart's whisper louder than society's roar. In the end it wasn't escape that freed them but embrace. Of each other, of the scars of a world remade one truthful step at a time.